The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. 3 riveting stories for you to close out the week. The first of which is that 2 pregnant men have given birth to baby girls, as reported by The Telegraph. Scott Parker and Hayden Cross. Yeah, I'm getting weird looks. I'm getting weird looks from Brian about the story, who doesn't understand that these are transgender men born female. Now Brian is calming down. Believed to be the first 2 men to give birth in the country after putting their transitions on hold to carry out their pregnancies. So in short, these are individuals who were born biologically female, who were living as men, but had stopped short of their physical transformation and have now given birth to kids. And I say with peace and love, sounds great.
Certainly an attention-grabbing headline because you hear that and you're like, how could that possibly happen?
Sure.
Once you realize that they're transitioning, it makes complete sense.
I have read, though, that in the future, I don't know how far into the future, there will be men who were born as men who will be able to carry a child to term and give birth. I don't know. I didn't care enough about it to read into the logistics, but, you know, it's amazing the advances that medical science have made, I guess is what I can say.
So you're saying I could potentially father a child that I carried around for 9 months?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how you would be impregnated. Like, I really don't understand.
I don't want to think about that.
I genuinely don't know how it would work, but I've seen that. And, you know, the right wingers, I saw comments on this article that were using about these 2 men who gave birth. The right wingers who just have vitriol and hatred for the transgender community. How are you so affected by the fact that 2 men did this? Like, how does it affect your life that this has happened?
Well, I think what they try to argue is that this isn't really fair to the child because they're going to grow up and be teased or whatever.
Okay.
But the problem with that is more of that more goes against our society for not accepting the transgender community more so than it does for the child. Because if people took our attitude towards it and said, go ahead, whatever, it wouldn't be an issue at all.
Not to mention, will they be teased? I mean, presumably by the time that these 2 kids are in school, they will know their biological mothers as fathers, and presumably those individuals will be living as men in society. So I don't even know that they would get made fun of. Like, I mean, I get what you're saying, but is that even? I think we're starting to move away from that.
It would be a slim minority of people, and I think that's the same trend that you've seen both with with gender, with race, with homosexuality, and now with the transgender community.
Now, there is a question as to whether the 2 individuals are listed as mother or father on the birth certificate. As it turns out, both are listed as the mother on the birth certificates, although one of the individuals, Mr. Parker, told the Daily Mail that he wants to be listed as the father and that he was not allowed to be listed as the father, but that maybe this story will bring this issue to light and individuals in his position could in the future be listed as the father despite having given birth to their progeny.
That's interesting because they are transitioning to become males. So you'd think they would maybe be open to being listed as the father, but you never really know. It can be a tricky situation.
No, they want to be listed as the father, but
right.
They weren't allowed to be.
Oh.
I think Pat didn't understand where I was going with that. But anyway, you agree with this, right? I mean, you're completely fine with everything that's going on here.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
2017.
How could you be against it? Live your life. Create something of value in the world. That's
perhaps
my message.
Kids.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's my message to people who are trolling online articles with transgender hate memes. We told you, I guess it's been about a year and a half, or were you around, Pat, when we did the story about how SeaWorld said they were going to be ending their whale program?
I'm sure I was around, just not here.
Okay, that's what I mean. Were you here? Okay. Thank you, Pat. Pat's really helping out today with the bonus show. SeaWorld announced that they were going to be ending their whale program, which is basically all they do, and they were going to be not breeding any more whales, but would be continuing to care for the whales that they have. Now, of course, it turned out that I believe a number of their whales were already pregnant at the time of this announcement. Very, very convenient for them. But this hasn't stopped the atrocities that continue to take place at SeaWorld in Orlando, where now we've learned that a beluga whale died shortly after it was born at the theme park. An investigation has started. What was the cause of death? We don't yet know. and that it died within a week of being born. And that place is just flat out immoral, isn't it?
Well, I think it's just easy to jump to the conclusion that the baby beluga died because of the captivity that it was in and that it had to be born into. But I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I think this sort of thing could happen in the wild. Certainly we have infant mortality when it comes to human beings.
Sure.
And if anything, because you had a staff there who could try to save the beluga's life, that would actually be perhaps a saving grace of it being in captivity.
That's the argument SeaWorld has made for a long time, which is in the wild, whales don't have modern state-of-the-art veterinary services.
Yeah.
However, the counter to that is in the wild, whales have far longer life expectancies, even accounting for infant mortality.
And I'm not making that argument at all, but I think it would be one of the saving graces, because you could actually potentially save this one whale's life.
What we do know is that the mother whale had a normal pregnancy, that the birth was normal as far as we know, and we don't know the answer. Did you go to SeaWorld as a kid?
I did once.
Did you really? Do you remember it?
I remember seeing the Shamu show, and I was just not very impressed by it.
Did it appear magical when you were a kid, or did you have some sense of that this isn't really great for the whales?
I didn't get the sense that it wasn't really great for the whales, because I think the conditions that they normally are in, you don't really get to see. That's when they're presenting in front of a large group of people. Yeah. And I was also around 11 or 12 when I saw the exhibit, which is a time where you kind of just hate everything as a preteen.
Right. And this was pre-veganism as well. So maybe
course.
you were not yet acquainted with some of the humanitarian issues with whale captivity, exploitation, I guess we would call it. Yeah. Have you seen Blackfish?
No.
Got to watch Blackfish. I believe it's still on Netflix. I watched it on Netflix. I have not been to SeaWorld, and I have no interest in going whatsoever. I don't anticipate being in Orlando anytime soon. And growing up, I never was that into it. It seemed kind of interesting growing up. I remember going to Disney World as a kid, and we didn't make it to SeaWorld, and I didn't really care.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to other theme parks, I could see how you would make your way over to SeaWorld. Yeah. But I don't see that as a real destination, especially now, because, I mean, that was the biggest attraction why people went there. I'm sure their sales must be down at this point, right?
SeaWorld?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And they're shutting the whole thing down anyway, which I like to see.
Good.
It's bad, but watch Blackfish. Coffee. Is coffee controversial enough for Pat's Keurig usage to take him down? No, that's not actually the coffee question. The age-old coffee question is coffee good for your health, or is coffee neutral for your health, or is coffee bad for your health? It's increasingly clear that coffee's not bad for your health, but there are ongoing debates about whether coffee is good for health or just irrelevant to health. There are now, this is sort of like, are eggs good now, or eggs are bad, or cholesterol good, bad, whatever. There are two new studies published this week which say that greater coffee consumption could lead to better health. The study surveyed 520,000 people in 10 different European countries. This is the largest coffee study to date on coffee and mortality, and it found that drinking more coffee appears to lower the risk of mortality. Then there was a second study done. This one focused only on non-white people. They surveyed 185,000 African Americans, Native Americans, Hawaiians, Japanese Americans, Latinos, and whites. And it compared whether the impact of coffee was different across different races, and they found that for all races, coffee increases longevity. People who drank 2 to 4 cups a day had an 18% lower risk of death compared to people who didn't drink coffee, blah, 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 blah. Now, the obvious question with all these studies is, great, you found a correlation. Is there a causal relationship?
Right.
Is there something that coffee drinkers are more likely to do in addition to drinking coffee that might be responsible for the lower mortality? In other words, could it be that the additional energy from the caffeine is getting people to be more active in the 3 to 5 hours following the consumption of coffee, and it is that additional activity, which could come from coffee or a caffeine pill or some other energy supplement, I don't know, and that it is the activity that is beneficial, not the coffee itself. Sure, I mean, that's possible, right?
I'd love to see a causation study done because this was, just a survey. You can only really find if it correlates. It reminds me of that study that shows that vegetarians live 10 years longer on average. And that's not necessarily a causal relationship. It could just be because they overall eat a healthier diet.
Yeah.
But I think it also has to do with the fact that you're just eliminating high cholesterol foods, high saturated fat foods from your diet. So even those possibilities of eating those foods are gone.
So just as a cap, there's a lot in there that is very controversial. So yeah, there's no study that has shown vegetarians live longer because they're vegetarians. But one can imagine if you're making any proactive health decision about diet as opposed to just, hey, I eat whatever I grew up eating or whatever, you're already more predisposed to be aware of what is and isn't healthy. You're very likely to exercise significantly more, as has been shown, and blah, 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 blah. So correlation, causation. The other thing you mentioned is also interesting, which is that for 40 or 50 years, there have been really specific health claims made about cutting out saturated fat is really, really good, or adding this is really, really bad, or whatever the case may be. Because when you think of your diet, unless you're doing caloric restriction, typically you're replacing calories from one thing with calories from another. And it can become very difficult to say, well, is there a health benefit to eliminating A or to adding B, which is what you replaced A with, so to speak? So like the famous fat studies, I think it's from the 70s, they're now considered dubious in terms of their value because they argued by eliminating fat, that is what is healthy because of the cholesterol aspect. But now we've learned it's not totally clear that there's a connection between cholesterol in food to cholesterol in blood, number one. And this comes to the whole eggs are good or eggs are bad thing. And if you're eating more vegetables as a result of having cut out the saturated fats from meat, is it the elimination of the saturated fats or the addition of the vegetables that's causing the health benefits? So it's just so hard to isolate one factor, I think, is the point.
Right, and I do think it comes down to the macronutrient ratios too, because you have carbs, fats, and protein, and I think all three of those things can be controversial in some groups. I mean, you have like the Atkins diet, you have these paleo people, so it is one of the biggest conversations of all time.
Yes, it is. Now, as far as coffee goes, you're still on coffee, right?
I drink about 2 cups of coffee a day. I would say I'm on coffee, yeah.
Hold on a second. Wait. Do you have your coffee mug there?
No, not today.
You don't. When you say 2 cups of coffee, how many cups do you think are in that coffee mug as measured in terms of actual cups?
2.
Oh, no.
We'll have to bring that in tomorrow.
Let's bring that thing in and we can bring in a measuring cup. I think you would be stunned. Pat has one of these thermoses of coffee that he might believe is 2 cups, but it's not. A cup, I believe, is
8 fluid ounces?
No, I think it's 6 ounces. I don't remember offhand now. But when you think about a cup of coffee, really what we're talking about is I believe a traditional cappuccino cup of coffee, which is 6 ounces, only 2 ounces of which are espresso, 4 ounces of milk, roughly. So a lot of times people think they're having 1 cup because they filled their cup once. And it could be one of those big paper cups that has like 3 or 4 cups in it. I think if you're filling that thermos once a day, you're drinking way more than 2 cups.
Well, let's take a look at that study again. It says people who drank 2 to 4 cups a day had a 18% lower risk of death.
Yep.
So I think by that logic, I can just drink 10 cups of coffee a day and
you'd have like
maybe
a 60%.
live forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so anyway, we'll figure out how many cups of coffee Pat's drinking. I typically drink a cup of coffee a day, and I actually mean a cup.
I think this could be worthy of a deeper dive.
Yeah, right. Long-form investigation into coffee consumption. Okay, I don't think I have anything else to say about coffee right now. Oh, yeah. Most of the studies do distinguish between caffeinated coffee and non-caffeinated. It appears that all of the benefits that at least have been correlated to coffee drinking only apply to caffeinated coffee, not to decaf.
So it could just be the caffeine then?
It could be the caffeine.
Interesting.
It could be the caffeine, yeah.
So, I mean, I think the lesson here is that you can buy David Pakman Show coffee.
Right.
And it will have no negative health consequences for you.
Well, we don't want to make any medical statements definitively, but yeah. All right, so scratch that last thing Pat said. But buy the coffee. That's the key thing.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.